Welcome back, listeners, to Sandman Stories Presents, a folklore podcast where I read you to sleep or until the next story. I'm your host, Dustin. Today we are back in the book of Ecuadorian folklore collected by Mario Conde. The first story comes from the people of the Amazon, and it explains how the tree known as Sangre de Drago, or Blood of the Dragon, came to be. If you don't know about this tree, you should go and check it out. It's really cool. And the second story comes from the Cañares, who live in the Andes and were rivals to the Inca. It tells about how their people came to be. Okay, let's begin. She Who Never Cries. In a tranquil and prosperous indigenous community in the Amazon, there lived a beautiful girl named Sanyi. The whole world admired her and cared for her, but she did not care about the feelings of others. Nothing moved her spirit. No one touched her heart. She was known as the one who never cries. When winter came, the torrential rains fell morning, noon, and night. The streams and rivers overflowed. Huts, farms, and animals were swept away. The people cried and wept in the face of this disaster. Only Sanyi remained indifferent. She did not shed a single tear. Devastated by the community's destruction, the people spoke bitterly of Sanyi's coldness. "Look at her. She doesn't even care," said some. "Not even crying children will move her," said others. "Everything that has happened to us is her fault. The gods are punishing her for not having compassion." Most agreed. Then an elderly woman, the wisest of the community, proclaimed that only Sanyi's tears could stop the terrible rains and floods. However, the question was how to make her mourn, since the girl was indifferent even to the suffering of her own family. In the end, the old woman insisted that Sanyi must know pain for her soul to be moved. One cloudy day, the one who never cries was walking through the forest when the old woman appeared. "Please help me collect dry branches," she pleaded. "I have to heat my home. My grandson is freezing to death." Sanyi glanced at her apathetically and continued on her way. Almost instantly, a young mother appeared with a sick child in her arms. "I beg of you, help me find the herbs that I need to cure my son." Although Sanyi knew where to find them, she refused to help the young mother. She was going to keep going when she heard the voice of the old woman cursing her. "The gods will punish you for not taking pity on a mother and a grandmother. You will never be a mother nor a grandmother. Oh, what harm you have caused us by never crying. From this day forward, you will pay with your tears, which will bring good to the rest of us." Upon hearing the words of the old woman, Sanyi suddenly felt her body go stiff. Her feet began to shrink. Her toes rooted themselves into the earth. Her skin began to harden and crack. Her arms swelled and expanded into branches. She had become a tree. Since then, the forest has been filled with a new species of medicinal tree. When the bark is cut, the tree feels pain and weeps from the wound. Tears from the tree heal burns, infections, ulcers, and other ailments. In this way, the old woman's curse has been fulfilled. The soul of Sanyi, trapped within the tree, eases the pain and brings good to the people. The indigenous people of the Amazon know this medicinal species as a dragon blood tree. The end. Okay, and story number 2, the Macaws. Many different cultures around the world have a legend about the Great Flood. Such is the case of the Cañares, who live in what is now Azuay province in southern Ecuador. According to the stories passed down from long, long ago, their origins lie in this great flood. The Cañares say that in those times their lands were already populated. With the coming of the floodwaters, the ancient inhabitants climbed the nearby hills, but they gradually perished as the waves covered even the highest peaks. In the end, only 2 brothers had managed to survive by taking refuge on a mountain that grew like the waters. One morning, when the rains had ceased, the 2 brothers left the cave where they had been holed up, and they went out in search of food. When they returned in the afternoon, hungry and tired, the brothers got the surprise of their lives. There was a meal prepared, fresh chicha, and beautiful flowers that had turned the sad, dark cave into a happy place full of color. Who had given them this magnificent gift? Seeing no one around, the brothers decided to try the food. They ate, and their hunger went away. This went on for 3 days. The brothers left in the morning, and upon returning in the afternoon, they found food, drink, and flowers. But there was never a trace of footprints or a sign of who provided this bounty. Intrigued, they decided to find out who this mysterious benefactor was. To do it, they determined that the younger brother would go out in search of food as before, while the older one would stay hidden in the cave. Said and done. The brother was waiting in silence, when suddenly he heard the beating of wings at the entrance of the cave. He hid behind a rock so as not to be discovered, and waited as the noise became louder and louder. Then he poked his head out and saw 2 macaws with beautiful women's faces, and bodies covered with splendid feathers shining like the sun. Despite their almost divine appearance, what surprised the older brother the most was the various foods that these macaws had brought from the land to prepare the meal. Eager to catch the birds so that he could marry one of them, the older brother left his hiding place and lunged towards the 2 birds. He came up empty-handed. The bird women spread their wings and fled the cave. The following day, the younger brother hid himself instead of the older one. The scene repeated itself almost exactly the same as the day before, except that he waited until the macaws, busy preparing the meal, let their guard down. Then he rushed full speed at the smaller one and caught her. Meanwhile, the larger macaw took wing and fled. From this point onwards, the legend does not tell what happened to the macaw that flew away, nor the older brother. It only speaks of the younger brother and the small macaw, who married, and had 6 children, 3 girls and 3 boys. Years later, when the waters dried up, the 3 pairs came down from their mountain home, dispersed through the Azue province, and gave birth to the Kenyeri people. Thus, the Kenyeris know this mountain as Huakayanyan, or the Path of Tears, in memory of the pain and anguish of those 2 brothers who survived the flood. Thus they consider the hill a guardian entity as much as the macaws whose colorful feathers they wear during their festivals. The end. I love these stories that tell how things came to be. The dragon's blood tree is really amazing and is used in modern medicine as well. There are varieties of this tree in Yemen and in the Canary Islands as well. I felt a little bit bad for the girl who didn't cry because no one asked her why she wasn't crying, but the good news is that the people were helped. And in the second one, I like how the story combines history with fantasy. The name of the people breaks down into snake macaw because they say that those are the animals that they came from. And a big shout out always to Mario Conde for letting me record these stories, and to the people of Ecuador. And shout out to the Pasantes, just because. The podcast shout out is to the Well, That Is Interesting podcast hosted by Jill. This show is news of the weird on steroids. Always entertaining, Jill tells stories from the news that are bizarre and almost unbelievable. Take, for example, the news that sperm whales release giant poo plumes to escape from orcas. And if you like her show as much as I do, go and give her a listen, a like, and a review. And the listener shout-out is to the megacity of Tokyo. Formerly known as Edo, Tokyo became the new capital during the Meiji Restoration. Its name means Eastern Capital, and that's exactly what it is, since the capital moved from Kyoto to Tokyo in 1868. It is a city that is familiar worldwide, and a city that I would love to visit, although the sheer number of people living there does make me a little nervous. So I say to my listeners living in Tokyo, Arigato, soshite oyasumi. Thank you, and good night.